Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the WMBriggs.com podcast. There's been a bit of confusion about the times, but we're live now, and we're going to talk about predictions, good and bad, but we're in no rush to do so, so why don't we listen to a little Benny Goodman just for a minute.
Robins sing in December, long before the springtime is due. And even though it's snowing, violets are growing. I know why, and so do you. Why do breezes sigh every evening, whispering your name as they do? And why have I the feeling stars are on my ceiling? I know why, and so do you.
Hey, to our younger members of the audience, that was what used to be called music. It actually had melodies, voices that were distinguishable, and lyrics that were not embarrassing to listen to in front of your mother. Well, there's a bit of mix-up about the times. I'm going to probably switch the time around for this live broadcast. It has to be live for many reasons, which I'll explain on the blog. This particular time I had to choose because tonight I'm going to an event with Steve Forbes and George Gilder. George Gilder has a new book out, The Scandal of Money, Why Wall Street Recovers But the Economy Never Does. George was very kind enough to give me a copy of the book. I read it. I'm going to review it probably for Stream or some other outlet. I doubt it'll be on the blog. But I'll try to cover the event tonight. It's about the future of capitalism, which is now, of course, a very political subject. And as everybody knows, there's much acrimony over the state of politics, especially in the Republican race, well, also in the Democratic race. A lot of enemies are being made. It's almost as if there's a civil war. So I want to assure listeners that if they're a Trump supporter, if they support Donald Trump, I do too. I'm right there behind you all the way. On the other hand, if you're with Cruz, if you're for Cruz, well, so am I. I couldn't be more for Cruz than you are. But I know some of the audience, some of you listeners out there, are big fans of Hillary Clinton, too. And why don't we, I'm not a fan of Hillary Clinton, but I'll let her explain herself in her own words and, give her a little chance to say something. So, Hillary, what do you say? Well, there you are. I mean, how can you say it better than that? I'm sorry about that. The door was left open. This happens every time I play the clip. Somebody close the door. Don't let all these devils... Put my wallet down. Drop that. Not on the rug. Oh, jeez. Down, Biden. Down, Biden. Bad dog. Listen, if you guys don't stop this, no more 0% interest rates from the Fed. I'm sorry about that, everybody. Every time I play that clip and the door is not secured, that happens. It's my own fault. I should have known better, but from now on, the door will be closed. All right, before we begin, let's begin with the news, I should say. Every broadcast should have news, and we're no different, and let's get right to it. Here we go.
It seems that late summer in Chicago has been cooler than usual, so maybe there is something to the claim that the Earth is heading for another ice age. An official of the National Science Foundation says the average temperature of the Earth's climate has dropped substantially since 1940, and that the period of maximum warmth in the Northern Hemisphere was 6,000 years ago. Down in Melbourne, Australia, a tattooed topless go-go dancer has been fired from a sideshow after it was discovered she was a he. The owner said he had to fire the topless dancer to maintain the image of a family show.
Well, I mean, we do want family entertainment, good old wholesome family entertainment. So what was that? A man pretending to be a woman, a woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman with tattoos? I lost track. Well, listen, the first part of that broadcast probably slipped by you. I snuck it in unawares. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play again for you just the first part. Just the first part so you can hear what's going on and pay real close attention. And after it's over, we'll talk about it. Before that, though, this is from September 23rd, 1971. 1971, some 45 years ago. From the station WLS, which is still broadcasting from Chicago. So here we go.
It seems that late summer in Chicago has been cooler than usual, so maybe there is something to the claim that the Earth is heading for another ice age. An official of the National Science Foundation says the average temperature of the Earth's climate has dropped substantially since 1940, and that the period of maximum warmth in the Northern Hemisphere was 6,000 years ago.
Well, let's see here. There's a lot to unpack in that claim. First of all, 1971. The temperatures from the 40s to the 70s, it was observed with much error, as it still exists today. That is to say, our temperature measurements are anything but certain, especially when we conglomerate them together to form a working definition of a global average temperature. Anyway, from the 40s to the 70s, the mid-70s, they were observed to drop a little. And at that time, the environmentalists began their big scares in the late 60s, really. They predicted all sorts of things. We're going to examine some of those claims in a few minutes. But in particular, what happened in climatology, in the science of climatology, the consensus was, as we heard from the National Science Foundation, a spokesman. This is all being denied now. All this stuff has been forced down the memory hole. But it really happened. It was really true that the quasi-governmental organization, which means, in other words, a governmental organization, from the National Science Foundation and many other scientists were predicting we were going to be plunged into another ice age. Or at least we were going to suffer greatly from cold, which was at that point going to be unstoppable. And why? Well, the same reasons offered in current times for why global warming is going to be such a menace. Because there were too many people. Too many people were burning fossil fuels back in the 60s and 70s. And this was, they said, causing so much pollution that the sun's rays were going to be knocked back into space and the Earth would cool. And the Earth cooling would set up a sort of feedback cycle, a negative feedback cycle, where winters would last longer, more snow would be deposited in the extremities, in the very far north and very far south, southern hemisphere south. And this would reflect even more sun back to space. Therefore, we would get cooler, and winters would last longer and longer. And eventually, of course, the new ice age, which, after all, we are going to expect again, would start much earlier. Well, this was so. Notice another thing about the broadcast, this prediction that they made. They admitted at the time that the warmest period on record was said to be then 6,000 years previously. Well, these numbers are in continuous adjustment because these sort of forecasts that they've made are embarrassments to them. And the forecasts they're making today are embarrassments to them, which we'll talk about in a minute. One thing I want to say, though, is back then there was not just forecasts, bad forecasts about the weather. There were many other forecasts about what would happen to humanity because of population increase. Some of them due to the weather, some of them due to other things. The guy you have to follow on Twitter is named Steve Goddard. This guy's really good. He is not himself a scientist, and that's probably in his favor. His mind wasn't addled by theories, as some of the scientists that we have now today's are. And he's gone back and found many predictions that were made, contemporaneous predictions of doom. I'm going to read to you just one. It's really short. This is from a newspaper from October, the 6th of October, the Redlands Daily Facts from Redland, California. 6th of October, 1970. So this was a year before the forecast we heard of environmental doom. So here's the headline. Dr. Ehrlich, this is Paul Ehrlich, Dr. Ehrlich, outspoken ecologist to speak. And, of course, back then we used to call them ecologists. Now we're calling them environmentalists, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, here's the article. Giving aspirins to cancer victims is what Dr. Paul R. Ehrlich thinks of current proposals for pollution control. No real action has been taken to save the environment, he maintains. And it does need saving. Ehrlich predicts that the oceans will be as dead as Lake Erie in less than a decade. The DDT in our fatty tissues has reached levels high enough to cause brain damage and cirrhosis of the liver. America will be subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. I don't know about that cirrhosis of the liver and brain damage. He might have been hitting the bottle a little too much. Or it could have been global cooling. It's possible. All of these predictions failed. In fact, I don't know of a single prediction that Ehrlich made that was realized or that obtained. Yet this did not stop him, even in current days, from being feted, awarded, recognized, lauded, applauded, and awarded great amounts of money to continue his research to predict doom. Well, those environmental scares died off, as everybody, at least my listeners probably know. But and it's important to understand this. We're gonna keep these predictions in mind because in the 80s again, James Hansen and the others started the global warming scare. Now, there was all kinds of predictions made about global warming. The seas were going to rise such that many islands were going to disappear, Florida underwater. I'll read you some of these. John Kerry, at one point in 2001, John Kerry, our illustrious head of state, said that the West Side Highway will be, this is in New York City, I should say, the West Side Highway will be underwater by this time. He said in 10, 12 years. So by this point, we should already be underwater. I'm in Manhattan as we speak, and I can tell you the water levels are just fine. There were many predictions like this. Time magazine had a big cover early on about that same time in the early 2000s, which read, "Be worried. Be very worried. Climate change isn't some vague future problem. It's already damaging the planet at an alarming pace. Here is how it affects you, your kids, and their kids as well. Earth at the tipping point. It threatens your health. The climate crusaders," and on and on and on. None of the predictions made about global warming have been true. And more importantly, the models that we use to make these predictions are very poor, which I'm going to explain in a minute. First, though, before we get to that subject of how we know these are bad, that's obvious that we know these forecasts are bad, but how can you tell good forecasts from bad forecasts, and why is it? The more important question is why. Why are these forecasts still believed? But before we get to that, let's have a word from our sponsor. Say, friends, ever want more from your beer than just a drink? Dissatisfied with the message your choice of beverage conveys? Then why not pop open a Pretension Ale from Hipster Brewery and show everybody who you really are. Each handcrafted bottle of Pretension Ale is made from 100% gluten-free, organic, non-GMO water, and from barley grown only in the fields of farmers who have signed a pledge to support LGBT, QIWYFSM, POIUTR rights. Before it's made into our session ale, each grain of barley is hand-selected by our flannel-wearing brewmasters, many of whom have award-winning beards. From there, each grain is lovingly carried on organic bicycles to our handmade still. where it becomes, in its own time, pretension ale. Pretension ale. Only $6.35 for each handcrafted 11-ounce bottle. Boy, it kind of makes you want to have one of those. Don't that make you thirsty? I don't think I'll stick with Old Overholt, but the producers of Pretension Ale have asked me to tell you that the carbon dioxide, all of the carbon dioxide that forms the bubbles in their beer is reclaimed atmospheric carbon dioxide. So there's a bit of an environmental bonus for you. All right. So we have the situation in front of us. We've had now 50 years or more, or about 50 years, of miserably failed environmental predictions. The climatologists can't get the weather right. They can't get the climate right. The environmentalists make rotten, lousy predictions about the human population. We were supposed to have many, many different die-offs by this time. Never happened. And in fact, the opposite problem is now upon us. We're not making enough babies. But they at that time said we're going to make too many. They're now still saying we're making too many because the Earth can't support. The Earth has some sort of capacity to support only a fixed number of humans, whatever this is. Time and time again that we have made these predictions, and they are absolutely appalling, lousy predictions. Yet every time they are made, they're embraced by two sets of people. So we need to understand why this is the case. Now, these history of failed predictions, and I have this on the blog too, a larger discussion. So people can go to WMBriggs.com and take a look at that, and we could discuss more of it there. But the failed predictions usually are accepted in two ways. The first way is when the thing predicted is desirable in itself. And the second is when the action taken based on the thing prediction is itself desired. So let's unpack both of those things. The first is called wishcasting, when the thing itself that you're predicting is desired. It's called wishcasting. So that happens all the time when people make sports predictions, for instance. The Tigers were playing last night. I was saying they were going to win. They did win, but perhaps I edged up the chances in my own mind that they would have been victorious because I wanted them to win. When people want to bet on a stock, for instance, they're likely to think that the stock has a greater chance than is warranted by the evidence that they have because they want the stock to increase. And when people make political predictions about who's going to win the primary, for instance, in the Republican side, Trump or Cruz, or Hillary or Bernie on the Democrat side, they let their desires influence them because they want the thing that is being predicted to be true. Now, there are a narrow band of environmentalists, not as narrow as all that desire the predictions made of environmental doom. That is to say, they don't like people. They hate people. They would like to see far fewer people than there are. There's even some really radical nut jobs out there who would like to see no people. And they don't like people to breed, so that they edge these predictions. They keep these predictions. They cherish them. They hold them. Each one is believed because the thing in itself is desirable. Any past inaccuracies, no matter how many, are absolutely useless to them. They're impervious to this information. It does no good to tell these people of the past failures because no matter what, their desire has not changed, so that they'll always believe in the thing that's predicting. Now, before we get to the second thing about the actions taken, just because I want to show this, and we don't have a lot of time. We only have 30 minutes on this show. And I want to show people some old-time radio bits. And let's listen to this one first. And then when we come back, I'll finish up the discussion of predictions.
Now, another exciting episode in the life of the most fantastic crime fighter the world has ever known.
A monstrous and vicious strangler stalks Midland City, and the white-winged weekend warrior, Midland City's crushing answer to lawlessness and or evil, is prepared to strike terror into the criminal's cowardly heart as soon as he finds it.
This is the Commissioner, Miss Helfinger. Have we a report on the Feathered Fighter's encounter with the Strangler?
No, sir. The winged warrior hasn't checked in yet.
This is the Winged Warrior checking in.
Oh, hello, winged warrior. What was all that about?
Miss Helfinger, have you forgotten the telephone security check?
What?
To establish that I'm not an imposter?
Must we go through with that?
Miss Helfinger, if we ignore the established procedures that we have set up, we are flying in the face of the best law enforcement methods.
All right.
Go ahead.
Why did the chicken cross the street?
To get to the other side.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Hello?
Is that one of the questions?
Yes, your answer, please.
The egg.
Wrong.
The chicken.
Wrong.
We'll go on to the next question.
Listen, this was your idea.
I don't remember a question like that.
It's your security list. You wrote it.
Well, that's a stupid question. I'm changing it now.
To what?
To what is 244 divided by 12?
All right, what's 244 divided by 12?
We'll make it a question like that, for example. Well, I've got work to do.
What about the strangler?
Oh, yes. How are we spelling that again, Miss Helfinger?
Strangler, strangler.
Now, are you saying strangler or strangler?
Strangler.
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 Strangler?
Strangler.
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 Well, can the weekend warrior get this mess strangler settled?
Be listening tomorrow for another exciting episode in the life of the most fantastic crime fighter the world has ever known.
Now, that spot has absolutely nothing to do with predictions or environmentalism or anything. It's Chicken Man, a show I remember very fondly because AFARTS, the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service, used to broadcast it when I was stationed in Okinawa on the radio. Chicken Man was big in the 60s and up to the 70s. It was created by a guy named Dick Orkin. They're very difficult to find. They are for sale on iTunes, and I think Amazon also has them. You can get the digital versions of them. There are CDs out there, but they're very rare. They're all out of print, and good luck finding them. There are one or two things that you could find free on the internet. That's one of them. But I thought it would be fun. Let me read you something here to get back. Entirely bizarre segue, but let's get back to this prediction nonsense right here. Let me read you something about this from a politician. This is from, what's her name? Connie Hedegaard. Maybe I'm mispronouncing that. Connie Hedegaard, Europe's Climate Action Commissioner. So Europe has their very own Climate Action Commissioner. And she says, let's say that science, some decades from now, said, we were wrong. It was not about the climate. Would it not be, in any case, have been good to do many of the things you have to do in order to combat climate change? Well, first of all, there's no combating climate change. No power on Earth. No power on Earth can stop the Earth's climate from changing. The Earth's climate has always changed. It always will change. Nothing anybody can do will ever stop it from changing. So that's one fallacy in Miss Hedegaard, however it's pronounced, her reasoning. But that tells us something about this, though. Many people, particularly politicians and some activists, know very well of the history of failed predictions. But they desire the solution to the things predicted. They see themselves as that solution. That is why they promulgate these things. That is why they support them so strenuously. That is why any evidence, which is now, as they would say, overwhelming, that indicates failure on the parts of these predictions, is ignored. They toss it out the window. They don't care. They care more about the end result of the predictions. And this is not wrong in a sort of utilitarian or pragmatic sense. They are using these forecasts for a specific purpose. They don't care what the actual temperature of the Earth is or in any place. They don't care. They do care that the forecast itself sounds bad. They can then use that forecast. The forecast then becomes very useful to them. So they are supplied with by what? What's the phrase? Useful idiots? Is that the thing we want? Is that what we're calling scientists these days? That's too scurrilous. We won't say that. No. Scientists are superior beings. Are priestly caste. We can't put them in a bad light. No. But these people are giving these forecasts out and not paying any attention to their error-prone nature. So if you had a guy and he's trying to sell you a stock, and every time he says the stock will go up, it goes down or does nothing, you would very rightly not buy from this gentleman anymore. It would be preposterous to keep paying this stockbroker. But the very different thing is happening here when we're talking to these environmentalists and politicians and everything who want to sell us these forecasts. They want to sell us the product of these forecasts, which is their selves, their own good selves, the solutions of new taxes, the solution of new regulation, the solution of new energy sources, which by just a shocking coincidence are owned by either themselves or their pals or cronies or something like this. So we've reached a situation where, well, it's the same old situation. It's the old story. The root of all evil is the love of money. And I'm afraid that's what we're seeing with these predictions too. They're taking them, as bad as they are, as inaccurate as they are, as lousy as they are, and we have every reason to believe they'll continue to be as lousy as they have been, and they're pushing them. And they won't stop pushing them. Why should they? It's worked for them so far. Why should they not continue to go on like this? They will until they're pushed out of power. That's the only possible solution to this, I think. I don't see any other, particularly since the scientists who are supplying them these forecasts are on the dole, if you like. They're on the government dole. They don't, they're not selling themselves so outright. But what happens is, Congress puts out one of the things like the National Science Foundation, as we heard in 1971, or the National Institutes of Health. They'll put out a grant request for proposals, and ask people to come up with a certain finding or the like. And scientists are more than happy to take the money and give it to them. They always figure that they could, they'll do the right thing when the time to come the paper, and they'll tell of all the uncertainties that are really there and so forth. And it will be in their papers and everything. Everything they, all the caveats and supposeds and so forth will be in there. But they'll be routinely ignored by the politicians. And this is something scientists have to begin to understand. They have to really do a better job on their conveying of their uncertainty. Well, that's it. That's all the time we have. We've barely even scratched the surface of this. 30 minutes is just not enough. Next week, look for a new time. It'll still be Wednesday, but a different time. We're going to talk about equality. All about equality.